and welcome to a new episode of the Genesis Temple podcast. As usual, this is Damiano. In this episode, with my guest, Kurt, we're going to go over a whole bunch of movie-based games from the 80s and 90s, mostly based on the work that Kurt has done for his book for limited run games, Now Playing, the guide to 1980s and 90s movie games. So grab some popcorn and a joypad, but be careful, wash your hands before you do that, and let's dive into some movie games. Okay, so I'm here with Kurt from Arcade Gaming 101, and in this episode we're gonna go over a lot, or maybe not a lot, maybe a few, who knows, we don't know yet, of movie-based games. And movie-based games, for anybody that has been playing games for more than, 15 years, they've been pretty notorious in the industry, especially with gaming media, for being one of the worst types of games, can we say, that your money could buy. So if you were a gamer in the 80s, in the 90s, you probably learned a lesson the hard way. So Kurt, did you ever happen to buy a movie-based game back in the 80s or 90s, and were you disappointed by it?
Did I buy anything? That's a good question. Even as a kid, I was, I read video game magazines, and I got a good idea of what was good and what wasn't. I did rent a whole bunch of them, and they were rarely very satisfying. Like, I think Home Alone on the Nintendo was, I think, one of the most egregious ones. To play the Terminator on the Genesis. I did rent the Terminator on the Sega CD many years later, and that one's not too bad.
Yeah.
But as far as buying stuff, I don't think so. So, because again, I remember the reputation that a lot of them were bad. Total Recall was one that I remember renting at a friend's house, and that one was real rough. Like, the magazine that I read when I was a kid was called Video Games and Computer Entertainment, and they had a whole cover story on Total Recall, and they were really pushing that. Like, this is the future. We are, Hollywood on your screen at home, and that game was dire.
It is actually not one of the worst, at least not as far as Arnold Schwarzenegger games go on the NES. So, yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
So you're not angry against movie-based game. Then you're not the right person to write a book. I'm sorry.
Well, I was able to give it more of a, we know this is bad, but it's kind of also digging into it to find the stuff that is either actually good or at least interesting. Because some movie games are, obviously crap. They were just cobbled together on a low budget or on a short timeline or whatever. But generally, like, people who make games, they don't want to make bad stuff.
Yes.
Like, it just kind of ends out like that for assorted reasons. And sometimes things actually do come together in ways that are fun or ways that are interesting or unique, or you have a unique game design that maybe itself wasn't fun, but at least showed that people were trying.
I think that's the interesting thing about movie-based games, at least, kind of more primitive ones like back in the 80s and 90s. But of course, I think no conversation about movie-based games can be done or recorded ever in history without going back to the original. And of course, I'm talking about E.T. I'm gonna get it out of the way immediately. E.T. is not one of the worst games ever made.
It's not.
Absolutely not. It's just a game that was made very quickly by one developer, of course, because that was the ticket back in the day on the Atari VCS or 2600. And for what it was worth, it was fine, I think. It was not a great game, but then again, it's Atari 2600, so I don't know exactly what gamers back then were expecting. I guess, of course, they were expecting something better, sure. Something that made more sense, maybe, yes, also. But as far as movie-based games go, that one is okay. It's not one of the worst games ever made. But let me hear your take on it, Kurt.
I'm surprised that game got picked up as the zeitgeist as being like the game that killed the Atari 2600. Well, I guess it's, because of the situation with the crash. But as far as the reputation of one of the worst games of all time, like, have you ever played Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark game? Because that is equally as baffling, if not more so.
Yes.
That is a game that, again, I didn't have, but I remember going over to a cousin's house, and you're like, we have this Indiana Jones game. That's probably pretty cool. You had no idea what the hell was going on. That game is so much more baffling. And that's like a big name. It's not like it was a game that would have been skipped over or ignored. So I think like that's roughly on the level of E.T. as far as just weird complexity. And it is not really regarded with the same level of derision I mean, some games where that's just the nature of them evolving was making these really obtuse games that were like impossible to play unless you studied the manual,
Yes.
and even then were just a little baffling. There was another ET game that came out for computer platforms that I think is kind of the same idea, but ended up being a little better. Just because I think the graphics were a little better, so you actually are like, oh, I actually am walking around the forest. I understand what's going on a little bit more.
But speaking of Indiana Jones, this is not a movie-based game, so this is one of the very few Indiana Jones games, at least in the 80s, that is probably the only one game that came out, and it's not based on a movie. Did you play Indiana Jones in the Lost Kingdom from 1984?
Oh, is that the Commodore 64 one?
Yes.
Or yes, yeah.
That is something.
Yeah, that's another interesting one.
Like, I understand that, of course, again, it was made by one person. It's on the Commodore 64. It's 1984, so we're talking about, like, early Commodore 64 days, so anything went back then, which made for some interesting experiences that have aged very well for being, like, 40 years old or even more, but also there's very strange games out there. Lost Kingdom is one of the strange ones, for sure. Just to say one thing in this game, Indiana Jones has the whip, but I don't think you can use it.
It's weird.
As far as I know, you cannot use it.
I can't remember, but yeah, it was weird. I'm surprised that a game like that was able to get published. Like nowadays, like there's so many licensing hoops you have to go through to get movie approval, but that's also... The book talks about stuff like that. Like, it was really a Wild West, especially for stuff that was made in Japan and was only ever be released in Japan. They were just like, they just signed a contract. What was in it, they didn't really know or care. So you ended up with some pretty weird stuff.
Yes, that's for sure. But then again, Lost Kingdom is not based on a movie, so it's not relevant to our discussion. I'm sorry, I cannot get into it, but if anyone out there is interested, then take a look, because this is a weird one. I mean, I played it on stream for the first time in my life, and my reaction was just, what the heck is this? So, yes, very interesting. Around the same time, so this is one that I like to talk about, because it is quite unique in that it's a bad game, but it makes sense with the movie that is based on for being bad. So we're talking about Friday the 13th, but not the NES game, but the 1986 home computer version. So it came out on CPC, Spectrum, and Commodore 64. So have you played that one?
Oh, yeah. That one is, like, when I say that we covered everything for the book, we covered everything that I could find. So even the Indiana Jones game, the Commodore 64 one, there was a text adventure that was not based on any specific movie. One's in there too. But yeah, the Friday the 13th game, the biggest thing I remember about that is the shriek.
Sorry, I called it the first jump scare in the history of games, because I don't think there was anything like that. I mean, people sometimes refer to Rescue on Fractalus, also by Lucasfilm Games, as having the first jump scare, but the monster popping up in Rescue on Fractalus did have a point in that it was attacking you, so there's a reason why that pops up and it scares you, because it's attacking you, so it makes sense. The shriek in Friday the 13th, it's completely useless, so it's just a jump scare. It doesn't really serve any purpose in the game except to boo.
The one I do try to go to bat for it is the Friday the 13th Nintendo game. That was one of those ones that even back when I was a kid had a reputation for being really, really bad. And I don't think I admire the design of that game a lot. Like, I think it's extremely ambitious for what they're trying to do, but just knowing the development periods of some of these types of games, like Jaws for the Nintendo, which is another, like, not super great game. That game was developed in like 3 months, and we don't know any of the development history behind Friday the 13th, but it was probably around a similar timeline, because these games were published by the LJN toy publisher, toy company LJN, and they have a reputation for all this crap. Some of those games were developed like all around the world, but this specific one, Friday the 13th, was by Atlas, who was a relatively new company around the time, and then Jaws was, I think, contracted to Atlas, but subcontracted down to the company that would be known as Westone, who made the Wonder Boy games. And so again, like the timeline for these games is just a little much. And Friday the 13th biggest sin is that it's very complex. It's one of those games that's difficult to understand to play without the manual, and it's also way too hard. Like, I definitely understand any kid who played this back in the day who would just like not understand what to do and then find Jason and die, and that was just all they ever understood of the game. But as far as like all the stuff you're supposed to do, like I really admire this sort of open-ended, I love the Metroidvania games and those games of the era that are trying to figure out to do like an adventure style game, but also make it actiony. And the fact that it has a very interesting structure, with all the, just like the couple different areas you have to go through, and the timeline, all sorts of things like that, and the different characters you can play as. Again, probably way too ambitious for what they were able to actually accomplish. But that's also how I try to like look at these games. Like if you watch people like play the game for a long time, like experts, you actually get a good grasp. Like, oh, I can actually play and enjoy this. Now I know
which also applies to. I mean, we're talking NES horror games. Of course, I'm going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street, which was by Rare, if I remember correctly.
The Nintendo one was
Nintendo
by
one.
Rare.
Yeah, the Nintendo one. That one also, I think, was okay. The DOS version was made by Westwood, again, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong. But they're both kind of interesting takes on a formula that, I mean, NES, of course, is 2D side-scrolling, like action platformy thing. The DOS one, and I also think the Commodore 64 one, but I haven't played that one, so I'm not sure. But the DOS one is definitely overhead, kind of gauntlet type of action. So you got mazes, you got to go around, find stuff, find the other Dream Warriors and all that. They're interesting in what they're trying to do. I mean, they're not lazy, at least. I mean, they're not good. I think we can kind of agree on that, but they're not that bad, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember Nightmare on Elm Street was really sold as being a seller for the 4-score peripheral and, like, not too much else. But those games were a little difficult because they had to try to be horror games, but under the context of a extremely sanitized Nintendo experience.
Yeah.
So it couldn't be too scary. It couldn't be too bloody. Like, granted, there are games that really, like, go close to the bio-horror sense, like Abadox. And playing those games nowadays, like, wow, I'm surprised that I guess it's a monster that they're allowed to be a little gory instead of, like, with human blood and gore. But yeah, you don't really get the sense that they're horror games very much, at least like visually. Like there's scary stuff about them.
Yes, it's supposed to be scary if you're like 10 years old, so of course, looking at it a little bit later, it's okay, yes, kind of see what they were trying to do. Okay, so you were not one of those burned by movie-based games. I'm trying to think of if I can describe myself as being someone that was burned by movie-based games. I think I'm not. I think I learned pretty early on that if there was a license attached to something, keep your expectations low. So we're not even talking about movies, but anything. So I remember specifically the Judge Dredd. We're veering off a little bit from movies, but not that far away. I remember the Judge Dredd game on Commodore 64. I still don't think it's that bad, but I've seen some reviews that absolutely describe it as one of the worst games of the time. But yeah, back when I was a kid, I had no idea how to play it. I had no idea what to do. Judge Dredd was one of the very few games I had original. I had bought it originally, so I think there was a manual, but I don't think I had the concept of a manual back then. So I didn't read it, so I had no idea what I was doing, because depending on the level, you could shoot, or sometimes you could just warn people. I had no idea how to get the criminals to stop. If you could just say, halt, 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 they would just shoot at you and kill you. So that didn't really work, but okay. But yeah, that was the game that made me wary of, if there's a license attached, be careful, because it's probably gonna be a little bit mediocre. So
I actually, now that I think about it, I did have a good experience, because one of the first Nintendo games I bought was the Batman Nintendo game by Sunsoft. And that, I don't know why I was compelled. Maybe I read a review of it and I was like, yeah, this game is pretty good. Or maybe I just had seen the movie and decided to take a jump on it. But yeah, that one is really like a solid game. Sunsoft was good. They did a couple of licensed games around that time. And one funny one is that they had made a game that was based on the Terminator. It was rejected. That was a case where it was rejected by the licensor because it took place entirely in the future section, which, back then, like, because at that point only the first, I think only the first Terminator was probably out by that point in 1990, because Terminator 2 was 91, I think. But yeah, everybody was fascinated with the future section, because you only ever saw it for a few minutes. So the game Sunsoft made only took place in the future section, which made sense. It got rejected because of that. And then they reworked it into Journey to Silius, which is like a really good Nintendo game. And then the actual licensor, I think it was given to Mindscape, and then it was given to some like third-tier developer. And the Nintendo Terminator is like it's crap. It's bad.
That one is absolutely unsalvageable. I have nothing but good to say about that.
Yeah, but yeah, Sunsoft also made the Gremlins for the Nintendo Game Boy, Gremlins 2. That was really good. But then there were a whole bunch of other Gremlins games that came from other companies for the PC, which were not.
But one thing also
good.
that you can instantly recognize, Sunsoft game on NES, they all have one of the best soundtracks ever. I mean, even Journey to Silius, I use the soundtrack on a couple of my streams because it absolutely rocks.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, they really got like fantastic sound programmers. Like those games all sound amazing.
Yes, you can tell me. So at least, even if the game wasn't great, even though Sunsoft was okay, but at least you could always say, oh, but yeah, Sunsoft. So at least I got some good tunes out of the whole deal.
Going through a lot of these, there are a lot of cases like, well, this game isn't good, but the soundtrack is amazing, and that was a good thing that happened with a lot of Ocean games, a lot of games that came out of the UK.
Yeah.
Like the Jurassic Park Super Nintendo game is all right. I think nowadays it's okay to play because you can use save states. Back then it was long, but it has a really good soundtrack. The Waterworld Super Nintendo game sounds fantastic. Like I'm not even sure if that came out in North America or not, but the music again is really, really good. So even if you don't play the game, you can listen to the music a bit and maybe download it and listen later.
Yeah, speaking of Jurassic Park on SNES, since I spoke with the developers, there is an interesting tidbit that I can tell you. The developers were actually afraid that the game was too easy.
Oh yeah.
Imagine that. And they were partially right, because they also told me that there was a contest attached to the game, which I think you had to find all the secret rooms and find some kind of letters hidden, I don't know, something like that. And the contest was won in like a week. Apparently they were pretty good gamers back then.
I mean, if you're a kid that has nothing to do for the rest of the summer, then like Silver Surfer isn't covered in the book because it's not a movie, it's a comic book, but I'm working on another book that talks about the Silver Surfer, and one of the developers was on Twitter, and of course that game is like famously brutal. And he was like, well, we just like didn't really think about it. We thought that a kid, this would be their like one game that they would buy and devote their time for it. And like they're right to an extent. Like you'd play games over and over when you were a kid. But even then, I don't think I'd have the patience for Silver Surfer.
No, I don't think so. And speaking of the save states in Jurassic Park, the development team actually wanted to put them in because they were sure that gamers were gonna need it. But Ocean said, "Oh no, they're too expensive. We have to, make the cars with the SRAM. So now we're not gonna do that. So it's Ocean's fault."
Oh yeah. That explains a lot.
They weren't exactly the most, renowned for making those kind of choices. It was always about the money, which I think you can kind of tell from the games.
Yeah.
Speaking of sci-fi, and one thing that I spent a whole month of my life for some reason, because I hate myself because I'm stupid. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I spent a whole month researching the Lawnmower Man games.
Yep. Yeah. I remember they really hyped up the FMV version that was on the computers at the time, but this was the first time going for the book was playing the other ports, and there are a lot of cool visual effects in those games. I guess they figured that the 3D sections were not enough to stand on their own, so they're coupled with like the 2D side-scrolling Contra stuff, and those sections suck.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that almost all of the Lawnmower Man games, I really mean like 90% of them, they all add extra plot details to the movie, which I'm like,
yeah.
How did they? I mean, I guess it was part of the contract, and that it was okay. You can add whatever you want to the story. We don't care. But that's still kind of strange. I mean, imagine like the Jurassic Park SNES game, making what happens after they escape from the park? Oh, they come back and they do something else. It was like, what? Kind of strange.
That's right, because at a certain point, it's like, doesn't Job escape, and that becomes like the second half of the game?
Yes.
Yeah. There were almost all these properties I was familiar with just from either being familiar with the games or just cultural osmosis, but a lot of I had never actually seen. So when I was doing the book, I took the opportunity to watch the Lawnmower Man, and it was a little ridiculous.
It was pretty bad back in the day too. I think the main selling point was CGI, and that was it.
Yeah. My dad was big into like laser discs and stuff, so I remember him buying this one set that was just filled of CG animation, and they had a couple of scenes from that movie. But yeah, some of those like the Scarface game. The Scarface game, of course, came out long after the movie. Yep. And the whole premise of that game is, Scarface dies at the end. Like, I don't think that's really that big of a spoiler. And the premise of this game is that, what if he didn't? So, you're crawling out after being almost shot to death, and then it turns into what's basically like Grand Theft Auto Vice City, but a little goofier. The way that they would expand that stuff was sometimes a little unusual.
Yeah, I mean, I guess again for Lawnmower Man, nobody cared because in the case of Scarface, it's been years since the movie, so I guess nobody is betting on a sequel coming out for obvious reasons, or at least we can only hope that nothing.
They weren't able to get Al Pacino. No, was it that one? There was one that Al Pacino wasn't able to do. I forget. Because there's also like the Godfather game that was released around the same time. And I think there was something, it's in the book, but of course I've forgotten it that way we do it, that he was too old because, it was from like the early 80s that Scarface came out. It had been 25 some years. Like, he obviously sounds a little different. But there's some other case where I think somebody couldn't, like his likeness or his voice for the Godfather because it was tied up with other stuff.
Yeah, I remember something. I think it was they tried to get Marlon Brando back on. I think maybe that was it.
Oh, maybe it was Marlon Brando that was it.
Yeah, I think it was too old to redo any of the parts in the Godfather, so they couldn't make like a Scarface like Godfather video game. So that one did not come out. I remember a whole article about it. It was quite interesting. Imagine Brando coming back to do the Godfather. Done.
I never actually seen the Godfather movies up until I had watched some. It was just one of these, like, I remember watching part of it when I was sick on vacation, but of course it was like the TV version where they cut out all the violence. But yeah, as a kid, I was just never into mafia movies, and I think them being too popularized with Grand Theft Auto, there's something which it gets into in one of the supplementary sections, is that these video games are often stripped from the themes of the movies themselves, because video games at that time were just like, all right, action, like that's just what video games were good at the time.
Yes.
And then of course you lose all the context about what the movies were actually about. So for a long time, my impression of mob movies was all from stuff like Grand Theft Auto and things like that. I was just like, it's just edgy nonsense. And of course, it's like it's really a lot more complex than that.
I can agree in that I also came pretty late to The Godfather. I think I watched it for the first time when I was like 30, 29, so kind of late. At least compared to the fact that of course in Italy it's also pretty famous. For obvious reasons. Actually, I got interested because I started watching the old like gangster movies. We're talking about the original Scarface, the one from the 30s. And there were a lot of very good movies back then in the 30s and the 40s, like with James Cagney, Bogart and all that stuff. And it's interesting because if you take a look at the behind the scenes, the production of what was going on at the time, you see the same stuff like repeated, like the cycle of life, in a way, like the same thing that was happening with Grand Theft Auto, like in the 90s and 2000s, whatever, that people were afraid that gamers were going to copy what was going on in those games, were going to do crimes, whatever. Same thing was happening with the gangster movies in the 30s. So exactly the same thing, that Hollywood should stop making those gangster movies because the youths are going to go back because they celebrate the gangsters instead of making them the bad guys, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly the same thing that happened with video games. So nice to see same things happening over and over.
Yeah, it's the same as it ever was.
But speaking of action and narrative, there was one attempt, pretty early on, at doing two separate games for one movie. So attempting to do the action and the interaction, pardon the pun, and that one was pretty disappointing, I have to be honest. Nightbreed.
Yeah, that movie I had never heard of. I still didn't see that movie.
But I'm a big fan of Nightbreed.
It's wild that game got two separate versions of it, and like the action one is just like standard license crap. The story one is It's conceptually really neat because they're trying to make like an interactive version where you're actually like going to different scenes. There's lots of, I guess you would almost call them playable mini games. I don't think it really works.
No.
I think like they're just limited by either disk space or time or whatever other issues that they were run into.
Yes, I also love that company. You know, after they did both the I think what are they called? I actually have to look it up. Painting by Numbers or Impact Software. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The name already tells you everything you need to know. Painting by Numbers. What the heck? So they did the two Nightbreed games, which are quite awful. They didn't stop at that. They did Darkman, Robocop 2, Cool World, Hook. I mean,
I guess they just sort of.
Wow.
I mean, that's how they got work, I guess. Like, yeah, we have a proven record to get licensed games done in a reasonable amount of time. I didn't play all the games. Some of them were written by different people, so like I didn't play all the Darkman games, even though they were covered. What are some of the ones you just mentioned? Cruel Worlds. Which one did they do? I did play the Cool World
They did the Super Nintendo one.
Yeah, that game, some of them were very difficult to understand. Like, that movie is very chaotic. Like, I tried to watch that movie. Again, it was wild that movie, that was like all the magazines at the time, they stuck Cool World advertisements right in the back. That is not a children's movie.
No.
Like, it is pretty much just Ralph Bakshi, like being a horn dog for the entire run of the film. And I guess it's just like, it's because it's a cartoon. It's like Roger Rabbit, and it's not remotely. But it's very, like, busy. It just has I found, like, the art style and everything like, really ugly and depressing, so I couldn't really watch a whole lot of it. But when they turned it into a game, it's even, like, weirder. It's like, feels like a fever dream. Like, it doesn't help that, like, it's one of those games that they don't really give you a whole lot of context about what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and also, I mean, one would think, like today, if you think about movie-based games, you would think, it's a successful movie, it gets a game. But that's not really the case because, again, Nightbreed wasn't a successful movie at all, and it got 2 games. And Cool World wasn't successful either, and it got a lot of games. So yes, it wasn't something related to success. I think it was something probably related to, is this property gonna be successful? Like, can we make a game out of it? Yes. If so, yes, we should do it. But again, that's my guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think also it's part of the whole marketing scheme. It's like, okay, we have a movie, but also we have we have games that can go along with it. And of course, all this stuff they were planned to come out roughly at the same time as the movie, so they had absolutely no idea whether the movie would be well received. And that would always have like a knock-on effect. So if the movie was a failure, obviously most people were not going to care about the games either.
But at least, we got some cases, I'd have to think about which cases, but there were some cases where, a bad movie got a decent game or even a good one. It did happen sometimes. It's quite rare, but it did happen. I mean, I can only think about one, but it's very recent. It's the Mummy game by Way Forward. That one's pretty good.
Oh, the Mummy Demastered? Yeah, that's briefly covered in the book. Like most of the stuff in the Mummy that's covered in the book is, of course, based off of the one with Brendan Fraser. So that's where the focus is on that. But like at the end of that section, it's sort of like, okay, yeah, they made this game based off of the Mummy. Nobody really cares about the Tom Cruise movie, but this is like a really good Metroidvania with really good music.
Which again shows if you give the game to a developer that has kind of a pretty good CV in making 2D kind of pixel art, we can say games, you're gonna get something good. That's
yeah.
Might sound stupid, like, duh, but it isn't that stupid because it happened quite rarely. But there is, speaking of good movies that got bad games, which is, of course, is the majority, I have to say something. Okay, so maybe this is the one that burned me a bit, but I will go the extra length to defend it. Rocky on Master System.
Oh, my friend had that game. Most we could never figure out the timing of the bonus games, so we would always get wrecked by the time that we got to. I don't know if we ever were able to defeat Mr. T or Dolph Lundgren at the end, because it had like sort of little ropey boxing action, but then you had the mini games where you needed to succeed with them, otherwise you wouldn't be strong enough for the next boxing match. And I think nowadays, like, because I'm older, I understand the timing a little bit more. But back then, we were like, I just didn't get how any of it worked.
I don't know. I mean, I was a huge Rocky fan as a child. So when I got the game, I was like, okay, I didn't buy it, so it's not part of the whole, I got burned because I wasted money on it. No, I got it as a gift or so, I don't know, a present, whatever. I didn't buy it. But I was still incredibly fascinated by it, not only because it's one of probably the best looking games on Master System, but of course, so that has an effect when you're like, I don't know what I was, 8 years old, 9 years old. But I was also fascinated by the fact that the game doesn't use even one single music track from Rocky, which is something, because if you think Rocky, the first thing you're gonna think of is Gonna Fly Now, but that game uses all original music, which I guess they couldn't license it, they didn't have the money, Sega didn't care, I don't know what happened, but it is quite interesting that a movie with such a strong soundtrack, recognizable soundtrack, Eye of the Tiger, whatever, doesn't use any of the music from the series. Awesome.
I did. Now that I remember, I did have the Rambo game for not the Nintendo, the Master System one.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is like a pretty good Commando clone. Like, I hadn't played Commando because I only had like a Master System, and I was probably only like 7 years old. Because I remember, like my dad was going to the mall or something. And I made a list of like 15 Master System games. I'm like, Dad, can you buy these for me? And of course, back they're like $50 each. So obviously, like, that was not going to happen. But they did come back with Rambo. And I did play that a lot. That was pretty good for what it is. The story with that game, I don't know what exactly happened with it. Because in Japan, it has a different title. It's called Ashura, which means like the God of War. And in Europe, it's called both Secret Command and Secret Commando, depending on what you're looking at. And they're all basically the same game, but the Japanese and European versions don't have the Rambo license. So I'm not super clear if they started to create a Rambo game contingent on getting the license. They were able to get it for North America, so that's what they did. And then for other countries, they just released it without, or exactly like what the process was. I do know that there were cases where they would develop something for a license in mind, and then if it fell through, they would just, alter it a little bit. Because that was the case with Alex Kidd. They originally, it was going to be a Dragon Ball game, but they weren't able to make it happen, so it just became its own property. But when you have those regional things that come through, it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, which is basically the opposite of what happened when Sega made the two Fist of the North Star games, so the one on Master System and the one on Mega Drive, which they completely lost the license or didn't care or whatever happened. I don't know. Again, I'm not clear on exactly the details. When they ported the games to the Western market, Western audience, they changed everything. The first game became, I think, was called Black Belt. Kenshiro became like a karateka, just like a kung fu man that had to save his girlfriend from a lovely Japanese mess. I don't know what the manual says. I posted about a few days ago.
Oh, I love that game. That was one of the first Master System games I ever got. And like, it sort of made me a Fist of the North Star fan, even though, like, at the time, Fist of the North Star was not out in North America, so I had no idea what it was. So it sort of made a fan of me back then, because I just thought that, this dude that punches guys and they shatter, that's amazing. Like, all those little like post whenever you beat a boss, they would like all the different super moves to kill them. And then I did discover Fist of the North Star until like probably 20 years later. Like in North America, that series had a lot of false starts. Yeah. So I didn't really become familiar with it until I think the Sega PS2 fighting game, and I thought it was really cool, and then went backwards to sort of go through some of the other series. Like some of the comics were released, some of the show was released, but I remember talking to someone from Italy that said that it was like hugely popular over there. But
it was also popular, I think, in France, I think also in Spain, because like we shared a sort of, like enlarged universe of anime and manga at the time. So we're talking 80s, late 80s, mid 80s. We all watched the same stuff, basically.
Yeah.
So I was very fascinated because I remember when they were gonna release the Mega Drive in Italy. We're gonna publish the Mega Drive, and so one of the first games is Last Battle. when the Italian magazines got a hold of the news that Last Battle was going to be one of the first games to be published for the Mega Drive in Italy, they called it Fist of the North Star. So, the Kenshiro game. And they even made, like huge advertisement, like full page advertisement. Oh, Kenshiro is coming. So I can imagine, I was pretty young, so I don't remember, but I can imagine everyone being old enough, like then wondering, where did the Kenshiro game disappear to? Because Last Battle has nothing. I mean, of course, it's a Kenshiro game, but they removed the violence. This was Sega first gen on the Mega Drive, so they weren't still being edgy. So I guess that was, maybe they were gonna do the Nintendo and say, oh, let's be careful, let's remove the violence from Last Battle. And second of all, it's based on the second season of the anime, which wasn't as popular as the first. I think it's fair to say. And of course, they changed all the names, so you couldn't understand anything. And so, everyone I think was pretty disappointed with that one. So, it's strange marketing choices, but again, maybe the license was too expensive. Again, I don't know what happened, but they definitely lost on a big sale number, because if they released it as the Kenshiro game, I think that would have sold like hotcakes.
Yeah,
not a good idea for sure. I recently spoke with a lot of Disney producers about Disney games, and of course, most of Disney games in the late 80s and 90s are based on movies, so they're very relevant.
Yeah.
I was surprised to discover a lot of stuff that Disney was doing, even on games that I think anybody barely remember exist, like Arachnophobia. Like, there's a game based on the Arachnophobia movie, apparently.
Yeah, I have that. I'd gotten a lot of games, and like that movie scared. I should not have seen that movie as a child, because that definitely I can't deal with spiders anymore. But yeah, they made that. They had Buena Vista Software, and they did more than just movie tie-ins, because they did those too. I guess it was sort of a film, similar to what like LucasArts and Lucasfilm was, the Lucasfilm games, was that they were a division of it, and sometimes they did Disney properties, and other times they were just a software company that was funded by Disney. For the book, we didn't go into any of the cartoons, because there's so many of them, and I need to keep the book in the scope, and just so we figured that if this book was successful, then maybe we'd double back and do some of the cartoons. But there is Roger Rabbit. There's a couple of Roger Rabbit games that are covered in there. Yeah,
the Roger Rabbit games I actually have kind of an interesting history, because I think one of the first games that Disney itself developed in-house and produced was the Roger Rabbit PC game. I spoke with the producer who told me that it was the one big problem that game had was it had like a huge long intro that you cannot skip, and so when you die you go back to the intro, you have to rewatch it again. So he already knew that was going to be a problem, and he remembers that the game was released on Christmas Eve. He decided to go back to the office because the customer support back then in Disney was just one phone. They got like hundreds of phone calls about this particular issue, like, how do you skip the intro? So he told me he spent like the whole Christmas day in the office answering people that were angry about the non-skippable intro.
I guess it's just something that the developers didn't think of. Like, oh yeah, it's an intro, of course everybody's going to want to watch it.
Yes. Yeah, it also looked pretty good because, back in the day, Disney had still, even if it was the first game, it was still kind of like high production value, so it looked pretty good for the time. But yeah, and also another interesting tidbit that I found out for the NES version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Of course, you know that there's an infamous hint line in the game.
Yeah.
And so you speak to Jessica Rabbit, and she gives you like a phone number, you can call it, and if you call it back in the day, you would hear Jessica Rabbit giving you clues. So the problem was this, that the Kathleen Freeman, I think was the actress that voiced Jessica Rabbit in the movie, was too expensive. So when the producer asked Disney, they said, oh, we're gonna use a sound-alike to do the voice for Jessica Rabbit. So they recorded the hint line, they sent it to LGN, which is a publisher of course, and they got incredibly angry. And they phoned the producer and said, this actress doesn't sound at all like Jessica Rabbit's. Kids are gonna know the difference, they're gonna be angry. So they got into a huge mess about this. And it's interesting because if you know anything about LGN, you wouldn't think they would care about anything like this, because I mean the games speak for themselves, so
yeah. Honestly, I don't think a kid was going to get like unless it sounded like a grandmother. They're not going to really.
Unfortunately, the recording is lost, so we don't know. But the producer said it was okay, so I believe him. I guess it was. I mean, it was Disney, so I'm pretty sure they had good voice actresses who could do a pretty decent rendition of Jessica. So yeah. I'm sure it was fine. It was just LGN being, I don't know, maybe they had a bad day or something. But also, another interesting tidbit: have you played any of the Dick Tracy games?
Yep. That was one of those games like I subscribed to Nintendo Power, and I remember like reading the feature. Like, this game sounds pretty cool, but I didn't get to play it until I played for this book, and it is not. it's too hard. Like, again, design is neat, but there's no balancing. It's too difficult.
No, that one is a shame, because the game it could be okay, but it's definitely too difficult. There's no save feature until you get quite a bit far ahead, so you can save. Like, I mean, there has no save. It has a password system, I think, so you can't even go back. You die, you start again from the beginning. There's one life, so definitely not a good idea. But the interesting tidbit that I can tell you is that the producer told me that Warren Beatty had final word on all the games. All the games were shipped to his house, so that he could play them. Of course, by he could play them, I mean an assistant would take a look and say, "Oh, that's okay," and pass them along.
That must have been so difficult to do back then, because I mean they would have had to have been prototype versions.
Yes.
Like, in case he had any feedback, then the need to do that, and of course, like creating just a ROM. I mean, they only did that in really short runs for like magazines and promos and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out if the assistant to Warren Beatty ever played any of the Dick Tracy games. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no, but I mean, I might be wrong. Who knows? We don't know. But that also happened. Speaking of the beta version with the games from Japan, so that happened with DuckTales, the Capcom Disney games. That's what was going on. They were sent as like beta alpha versions so that they could play them and see if they were, coherent to Disney's wishes and the designs. For most of the time they were, apparently. So I guess Capcom already knew everything that they needed to make these games.
Yeah.
Thinking back now, right? It is kind of strange to think that in the 90s, I don't know if you remember this, a Disney game based on one of their movie properties, so The Lion King or Aladdin, was a huge thing, was a huge release. Like, they were one of the biggest games of the year, at least on console. Of course, we're talking about consoles. Yeah, I mean, if you think even like 5 years later, that didn't happen anymore. So it's weird how fast Disney went from being, on the top of the gaming scene, kind of course, but yeah, kind of, to Disney who?
I mean, that kind of like flows with how Disney was as a movie studio. Because when you think of Disney in the early 90s, like, they had the golden age that started with Little Mermaid and then went to... I mean, Beauty and the Beast only got a couple of... they got a couple of games, but that's not really like something you can make much of a game out of. But then you had like Aladdin, Lion King. Those were all like tremendous movies. That is, you got like to the end of the decade, you had this stuff like Pocahontas and Hercules, which were like all right, but not nearly as good as the other ones. And by the end of the 90s and the 2000s, like, Disney had kind of fizzled out. Because nobody cared about Brother Bear. Lilo and Stitch was good, though. And they did a bunch of tie-ins for that. And I think that made a good property, because there's a lot of different fun things you could do for that one. But, like, what other Disney movies even came out then? I know that they...
Treasure Planet?
Oh, yeah, that was a flop. That didn't end up with anything.
There's a lot of forgotten stuff around that time. They made games for all of those movies, by the way, but I couldn't tell you even what they look like. I have no idea.
Yeah, I just, again, like all the DuckTales, like, that has such a big cultural impact. Like, everybody loved that game. Again, Treasure Planet, no idea.
But yeah, it is interesting to note. Yes, I mean, you could say this. It mirrors like the success of their movies, but it's also interesting. Like back in with Aladdin and The Lion King, they were working with also the best studios around. Lion King was made by Westwood and blah blah blah. Aladdin was made by Virgin, which of course, I mean, Virgin games are a bit of depends what you're gonna get. So it's not like they were a perfect studio, but there were pretty good developers back then in the Virgin Studio. So yeah, it came out as a pretty good game. I mean, Dave Barry was part of the team, if I remember correctly. But yeah, after that, they just stopped working with with Go Studio. Even going back to the Pocahontas games or Hercules, yes, I think they were all done in-house. I think they were all done by Disney Interactive back then. And yeah, Disney Interactive was just fine at best. So
yeah, I mean, those companies would always have like shifts in management.
yes.
And if you look at their output, you can sort of tell like when their strategy changed to, all right, we're going to put all of our money into the best games, to we're just going to put our money into stuff that's going to sell.
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, for example, there's actually the Hunchback of Notre Dame game as well, but again, never even see what it looks like. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I have no. I mean, there must be, but I have no idea. The book does kind of get into how these games used to be like tentpole releases, and at a certain point they stopped. Like they still have made them along like the Xbox 360 era, but like you think of Star Wars, there were a bazillion Star Wars tie-ins back in the 90s, but the most recent movies didn't really get like their own games. The closest one you were able to get was they were remade in Lego Star Wars, but like that's the closest you'll get to like playing The Last Jedi.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, none of the latest movies got their own release. I mean, Episode 1 got their got their own game. So
oh yeah, Episode 1. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess like I think they realize that because these aren't just movies, they're media properties. So it's sort of better for them to take that media property and do something original with it that is unconstrained by having all the messiness involved with coordinating with a movie, of getting approved with a movie. And I think that they generally ended up being better for the players anyway. 'Cause, I mean, like at the time back in the 90s, it was like, oh, I can play the game. Even if it was a bad replication of, play the movie, I mean. It was a bad replication of the movie, at least it felt like it was interactive. Whereas nowadays, it's like, well, if I've already seen the movie, why do I care about playing a game that's based off of it? So when they would do an Indiana Jones, they would do an original Indiana Jones thing. And I think that is a little bit more interesting.
yeah, probably makes more sense for the modern gaming audience. I remember definitely one of the biggest ones that, when I was actually following the game that I bought, was the King Kong movie game based on Peter Jackson's movie. I don't know if you played that one.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad.
I remember being very much hyped back in the day. I remember it was called one of the best movie-based games ever made. It's okay.
Yeah. I remember it was short. Like, it's very short. It's very linear. It was sort of coming off the wave of Half-Life, and it was really trying to be very like cinematic in its presentation.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have a life bar, you didn't have an ammo meter, and I remember like enjoying it at the time. But it was also very short, and it just kind of like went in and out the other. Like, never went back to play it. Don't really care about going back to playing it.
Yeah, I think they made a remastered version, if I remember correctly. I didn't even take a look at it. It's like, okay, yes.
They had made a cartoon based off of that too, and there was a game or two that was based on the cartoon, like for the Game Boy Advance.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, some of those I didn't know. Like, there was a cartoon for the Mummy also, which I was surprised about. I mean, like, but by the time that came out, I was like in college or whatever, so I wasn't paying attention to Saturday morning cartoons. But and I know the PS2 game only came out in Europe, so it almost made me wonder if even the cartoon wasn't shown here. But I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. Again, I probably was too old as well to remember that. You've played a lot of games for the book, but so let me ask, what is the most memorable that you played that, of course, you didn't know before, or the weirdest? I don't know.
Oh, geez, I need to bring up the spreadsheet because there's like 900 or something games in here. I mean, the one that I always bring up when talking about it is the very first, I think it's the Terminator PC game. The one that's just like the 3D version where you can be either the Terminator or Kyle Reese, and the objective is to hunt the other player.
Yeah.
And it's, when you look at it, it doesn't look like it's a Terminator game because like everything is just very basic early 90s 3D. It's what what virtual reality was trying to be. Like Sarah Connor obviously doesn't look much like Sarah Connor. And the game, like, it doesn't entirely function. There's a lot of stuff that's broken or just unclear, and it's difficult to play. But for a game from 1990, its ambition is crazy. Another one that I like to bring up because I was not familiar with it was a Blade game for the Game Boy Color. It's a combination between like shoot 'em up sequences like in Cabal, like the over the shoulder sort of stuff, and beat 'em up sections. And when you play it, you're like, these sprites look a little familiar. So I looked up the developer, and it was all from ex-Technos people who had worked on like the Nintendo Double Dragons and stuff like that. Like this is neat. They had also made, this wasn't covered in the book because it wasn't based off a movie, but they made an X-Men game around the same time too, which plays pretty similarly. So those were both pretty good. There was another Terminator game that they made a bunch of Terminator games, and I was only familiar with the console ones, and those outside of the music from the Sega CD one weren't particularly great. But after they made that big open world one, they made what was basically like a real-time dungeon crawler. I guess it would be like something like Dungeon Master, but in the post-apocalyptic world. I didn't really enjoy that game, but I thought it was really neat that they made it.
I mean, yeah, I did play the original Terminator one, and it's definitely, it doesn't work. I mean, I guess especially not for kind of a modern gaming audience, I guess. Even with my, my biggest retro gamer hat, yeah. I don't find it to be especially interesting in the long run. A very fascinating attempt by Bethesda, especially because, they were gonna go and do the open world much better later on. But as an early attempt, it's still very fascinating. It's one of those games that it's easier to appreciate than to play. But yeah, I don't even think it has really anything to do with the movie. I mean, yes, it has the intro, it has the kind of look. But when you play it, you could just think about anything, and yeah, that will work either way because it doesn't really look like that you're playing something based on the Terminator anyway. So
there was one that surprised me. It was based on Dragonheart, which is another of those movies I remember seeing as a kid.
Ooh.
And there's apparently a whole bunch of direct-to-movie video sequels to that, which I don't think that movie really had much of a cultural impact at all.
No. I mean, I like it, but that's fine.
There was a game which was awful. It was one of those games that I want to say Acclaim put out a lot. That was it was a side-scrolling action game, but it looked like Mortal Kombat, and it controlled like Mortal Kombat, so it was really bad. But there's a Game Boy game that's sort of a mixture of a first-person dungeon crawler, and it had all these like side-view action sequence battles, and it was really, that one surprised me. That was better than I expected it to be. I mean, a lot of these games, because sometimes the games could be so radically different between platforms. Like sometimes they were all ports of each other, so they were all pretty similar, but sometimes they would be completely different, and you wouldn't know unless you played it. And that was one of those cases.
Yeah, I'm thinking, for example, about the Hulk point-and-click Amiga adventure game, which is absolutely awful. Yeah. That one is rough.
Oh, Hook. Yeah, I remember playing that for the adventure game book, and I thought it was okay, but it was also way too short.
If I knew it was short, I would have completed it. Yeah, I didn't have the patience.
Yeah. It was. What I was surprised on is like it makes sense that they were point-and-click adventure games because they're narratives. Movies are narratives, so that I think makes more sense than a lot of action games for certain games. Yep. But at a certain point, I was shocked at how many real-time strategy games there were. And of course, it makes sense at the time because your Command & Conquer and Warcraft 2 were enormous. There was a Waterworld real-time strategy game. That was bad. There was a real-time strategy game based off Small Soldiers. That was okay. There was one based off of The Lost World. That would have been better if they had the tech right. The game felt really choppy to play.
Wow. Yes. I mean, yes. We could stay here all day and talk about all kinds of movie-based stuff. There's so much weird stuff. Like one that I played recently that I didn't know it existed. It's the combo, because there's two flavors, because one is not enough, of the Austin Powers Game Boy Color. I don't even know if you could call it game. It's like a sort of desktop application for Game Boy Color, as much as that doesn't make any kind of sense whatsoever. I don't know if you played it.
Yeah, there was one of those for E.T. of all things. It was like a digital companion, and it was very strange because like E.T. came out when I was a child. Like I was like a toddler. Did anybody, any kid really care about E.T. in 1999?
Yeah.
I mean, they were trying to do, I guess, an anniversary. Like they had maybe brought it back again in theaters or putting it for new home release. So there was a big marketing blitz of E.T. stuff. And that was just the weirdest one.
Yeah. The Austin Powers once actually, because it has two flavors. You know, it's got Austin Powers, or the good and evil flavors of Austin Powers. It's again, it's a 100% desktop thing, but it's on Game Boy Color, so it has a lot of jokes based around Windows 2000 or ME. I don't know what was relevant at the time, and I'm like, what kind of audience on Game Boy Color would understand this kind of jokes back then?
Yeah.
Very, very strange. But yeah, that's a thing that exists. Also, in preparation for this podcast, I discovered something that I didn't know about. So we're veering into very obscure territory here. So beware, anybody that's listening. There is a 1984 Polish sci-fi movie called Sex Missia. Of course, I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm absolutely sure. I'm not Polish. I'm sorry. This is a 1984 kind of sci-fi comedy about a world that has been decimated and only women are alive. And there's these two men that come back, like we're cryogenically frozen or something. It's very good. It's a very good movie for what it is. So I recommend it. It has aged pretty decently for a kind of topic that would, raise an eyebrow today. It has aged okay. But I discovered there's not one, but two adventure games based on it. And I'm very curious to play them. I don't know if you play them on the book. I'm going to say no, but maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't play them for the book, no, but I know what you're talking about because
nice.
I had never heard of the movie. I had only heard of, because I think they showed up on GOG a couple of years ago.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Where I was like, okay, because I want to say somebody actually did an article for HG 101 about them. And again, it was very unusual. I don't even know where you would be able to see the movie. I haven't played the game. It sounded very strange, the setup. The book mostly concentrates on American movies just for the sake of scoping things.
Yes, of course.
I was able to stick in a couple of games that were based off of Japanese or Chinese movies that I think people would have been aware of. Like there's a Nintendo game called Phantom Fighter, which is based off of a kung fu movie, whose name I'm blanking on right now. There was recently, it was some beat 'em ups based on some of those spaghetti westerns that came out.
Yes, with Bud Spencer and Terence Hill.
I wasn't familiar with those at all. I should ask my dad, because those are the sort of movies my dad would like. Or look through our old laser discs to see if we have any of that stuff. But yeah, that was covered in there. The game Blazing Lasers on the PC, TurboGrafx 16, was originally based off of this movie called Gunhead, which I really wanted to see because it was made in the late 80s, and they were really trying to be like a live action anime with a multicultural cast. Like a live action Gundam, but and of course they didn't have any of the budget to do it, so how it actually comes out is probably not that great. And the game has nothing to do like Gunhead. The movie it's like Gundam. It's all about mechas, and Blazing Lasers is just like a top-down shoot 'em up. You see a mecha transform for a second, and that's it. It's nothing to do with it. So there's a couple of cases like that. I didn't want to get to too much of the Godzilla games because kaiju games are kind of they're its own topic. I'm not really big into kaiju movies. That's, if somebody else wants to do a book about kaiju, I would probably read it, but I wouldn't write it.
And of course, the one thing that I have to say on the podcast before the end is the Italian games based on movies, because there's very few of them. There are a couple based on comedies, which are just a bunch of mini games, so they're not interesting at all. So I would skip them. I'm not even going to mention the names because who cares? But the one I want to mention, it is one that is borderline unplayable today. So even I tried and I couldn't really get far, even with the solution on hand, with the walkthrough. It's the Nirvana X-ROM game. Nirvana is probably the one of the 2 or 3 maybe Italian sci-fi movies made after the 80s. I don't know how many were made, but very few. And Nirvana is quite an interesting concept because it's actually based on a video game in that the main character of a video game becomes self-aware and wants to be terminated, wants the source code to be destroyed. Unfortunately, the movie is not as interesting as I'm making it sound, but the concept is interesting. The concept is there. And Nirvana X-ROM works as a kind of behind-the-scenes CD-ROM and an adventure game at the same time, but the main problem is that it was written by someone who had never written a video game before or since. I think he only played Myst, and it definitely shows, because it's got that kind of cryptic BS, but taken like way more extreme. Like he's got like fourth wall breaking puzzles in that sometimes you have to switch the CD-ROM, like remove the CD-ROM to progress. I think there's one point you have to do that, and another point you have to actually look up a quote from a book, but the book is not in the game, so you have to, you know, get your ass out of the seat and go find the book. And that was the intention of the designer, so he told me that he wanted to do that, so it's not like I'm making it up. He told me I wanted the player to get up from the seat, so yes. Have you played that one? Did you find it interesting?
Oh, I'd never heard of that one. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a shame. Okay. Yeah, it's a very unique concept because it's one of the very few games that was developed alongside the movie. So, you know, he spoke with the director, so he went back and forth with the director. He's got FMV sequences with the actors from the movie. They definitely tried. And it's kind of a shame that nobody cares about it at all anymore. Like, I don't even think they cared about it back then. Like, I would imagine the director, I mean, if I was the director, I would say, oh, you know, there's a game that's coming out that's kind of like a companion to the movie, that it follows like a similar story, blah, blah, blah. But no, I couldn't find anything. I mean, as far as I know, the director doesn't even know the game exists, but he did know because it was his idea. But yeah. Yes, I guess, yeah, that's the Italian, that's it. I don't think there's really any more Italian-based games on movies, as far as I know. I mean, yeah, there's a few maybe based on like the Big Brother show, whatever, but that's it. As far as movie go, I think that's it.
There are a couple of games that were covered in there that weren't officially licensed, but they're very clearly based off of a movie. Like one was based off of, not Romancing the Stone, but the previous movie, Jewel of the Nile, I think. And it wasn't actually called that, but it's called something very similar. And there was a game in France, I think it was called Manhattan 95, that was very clearly supposed to be Escape from New York. Like, I mean, like there are bazillion games that are like inspired by movies, but aren't actually based on them. And there's too many of those to cover. Like I did a section at the end
that would need a separate book. I think.
That went over the influence of movies like, you know, Contra and Golden Axe was all just, you know, Rambo and Alien and Conan and all sorts of stuff. But like those two games were very supposed to be like these movies. And there were, I mean, it's like Zombie, the French game from Ubisoft was like Dawn of the Dead, and there was another one, Howling, which was I ended up including that in the book just because I needed something to fill up the rest of the space. It's not as close to the premise of the movie. It's a werewolf movie. It's not as close. Like Zombie is very much just like you have a bunch of survivors escaping from a mall and you're harassed by zombies. And the Howling isn't quite as close, but it was close enough.
Yeah, which I mean, are you talking about the Ubisoft game, like the sequel to Zombie? It's called Hors le Monde, or talking about something else?
Yeah, I don't want to say it because I can't pronounce French correctly.
Okay, so that's the one. Okay, that's the one. Okay.
For English, I would pronounce it Hurlmans, but I know that's not correct.
Yeah, it's Hors le Monde, like, you know, Howlings. I think that would be the right translation. Yeah. I played that one on stream, I think. Yeah, but no, it wasn't very good as a sequel to Zombie. I mean, Zombie was pretty decent for what it was, except that, you know, it's kind of, I don't know why they went for the monocolor look on most of the on-computer ports, because I think the original one was on Amstrad CPC, maybe, I could be wrong. But yeah, the Commodore 64 one is completely in black and white, but it actually adds to the experience. You know, it did freak me out as a kid. It's one of those games that I remember like being very scared of, because sometimes random stuff happened. Like if you left the window open, at one point there was a body that got like thrown into the room. I mean, thrown, of course, we're imagining it. There's no animation. So imagine the throw. And then you died instantly. And that freaked me out so much as a kid. I was like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah.
You know, early survival horror. So if one is interested about the stuff. And I mentioned survival horror, of course I have to mention Sweet Home. Did you cover that? Of course.
Did I? I think so.
No.
I'm pretty sure. I think that there's a section on it. I know. I work on a bunch of stuff, so it was definitely in the Japanese RPG book, and I want to say that I probably stuck it in the movie book too, because it is very historically important, like just within the context of. But like, I think people remember the game so much more than the movie, because I don't think the movie was ever. Or maybe it was just recent where they got a proper home video release outside of like VHS. Like nobody really cares about the movie or anything.
No.
But the game is like, this is it established so much horror video game stuff.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I mean, as far as Japanese horror movies from that time, I remember Hauzu, which is a bit of a classic. I mean, you would see the cover everywhere with the cat and everything.
Yeah, that's a wild movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I've never seen Sweet Home, and I've never met anyone who's seen it. So yeah, that movie has definitely disappeared. While the game now has its own like legacy, a huge legacy, but the movie not so much.
There's the other movie, House. Like it's not the Japanese one. It was like a mid-'80s movie, and that actually got a video game tie-in for the MSX in Japan.
I didn't know that.
It has a different name. It's like Masho no Yakata or something like that. And they tried to translate the word goblin, became Gavilan, and it's almost like a Zelda game, but it's a Zelda game that takes place in a haunted house, and then every once in a while you go through Vietnam flashbacks. Okay. And it's amongst like Japanese MSX fans, it's very well regarded. Oh,
but I have to play that one because I'm a very big House fan. I'm talking about the mid-'80s one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one has to be on my list immediately. I have to play that. There's so many. I mean, yes, this could go on forever, but I don't want to kidnap you and keep you from your family or loved ones. So, but yeah, let's end on the final thing. So. First of all, of course, if anybody is listening, go pre-order the book if this comes out before the pre-order. Otherwise, go buy it. I mean, whatever. It's on me if it comes out too late. But I want to know, of course, what's your favorite movie-based game? Even if it's bad, it's okay.
Yeah, again, I'd have to look through all the lists to really get a good idea. I'm just thinking about what I did for the book. The one I devoted the most space to was GoldenEye, because it's one of those ones that's... It was such a big, not only Nintendo 64 game, but it had a good tie-in with the FPS market at the time. Jeez. Again, I need to look through like my spreadsheets. Like, okay, which one is the one I really liked the most? I have a lot of strong memories of a lot of. This is interesting. I could just like pick one. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite.
But you can say one of your favorites. It's okay. It doesn't have to be like 100%.
I liked Die Hard Arcade. Maybe it's because I worked at a movie theater in the late 90s, and we had that game in the lobby. So whenever we would be working ticket taking, we would just hear like the track sequences or just the gameplay over and over. So we had that. We had Crazy Taxi. We had Marvel vs. Capcom. So much of that is burned into my head. Like the opening scene is like, I don't care about the SWAT members. Where's the president's daughter? And that's another case where in Japan it's a Die Hard-like game, and in America it's a proper Die Hard game. And it always throws me for a loop because, when I go shopping, every once in a while I'll see the Die Hard trilogy, which I think was more popular because it was on more systems, but the Die Hard trilogy is completely different, and I like Die Hard Arcade much more because it's a 3D beat 'em up. It's very goofy and over the top.
Yeah, they're definitely two different experiences. I mean, I'm more partial to the Die Hard trilogy because that's one of the first PSX games that I got. Unfortunately, I cannot say bought, but got. And it's a kind of a messy game. It's not really the most refined gameplay or graphics or even sound. I mean, some of the quotes don't make any sense. They're repeated over and over. But it's it's a messy fun, so it's okay. It's not one of those games that I like to go back again and again, but it's okay. But yeah, Die Hard Arcade is definitely more of a it's a different experience. It's more streamlined. Yeah. It makes a little bit more sense with the license. Maybe, I don't know.
Yes and no, because it just borrows that whole there's a building that's been taken over by terrorists, but like the whole point of the Die Hard is that he wasn't a superhero.
Yeah.
And then of course this game it turned your cops into like there's weapons everywhere. pummeling everything with their fists. So it completely, granted, the movies also lost that as they went along.
And now, of course, I'm remembering the Die Hard DOS game. Have you played that? That one is like the Terminator. Someone saw the Terminator game and thought, how can we make this but worse?
Yeah, that's another really interesting game because it's 3D. It's weird because it looks a little more Die Hardy because you do have those digitized sprites, which is almost definitely not what's his face, Bruce Willis. It's just probably just some staff member who was dressed like him, and you have to walk around, and it's almost impossible to play.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I do really admire that it tries to put all these different strategy of how to beat the terrorists on very, very limited resources. I feel like it's one of those games, like a lot of games back then, is that they weren't really necessarily made to be beaten. That used to be something that you would mess around with and try to get as far as you can.